Welcome to the Timberland Regional School District Budget Committee meeting. I'm opening this at approximately 8:37 PM. Could I have a roll call, please?
Alan David,
Here.
Eileen Doobie.
Here.
Lee Doobie, David Gurns,
Here.
Dan Guide,
Here.
Julie Hammond,
Here.
John Hughes,
Here.
Michael Mastola,
Here.
Sean O'Neill,
Here.
Jim Paul.
Here.
Also seated at the board table are Business Administrator Jeff Dowd.
You. Mr. Paul, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has everyone seen the minutes from last meeting from September 14th? Are there any? I'll look over, in a few minutes, just look it over, and let me know if there's any corrections or errors.
I just have one at the eight minute, or 8:26 PM. 26 minutes and 53 seconds in that box there. The last sentence there is, this discussion ensued about the budget committee's jurisdiction to recommend a representative. And what I think that should be is to appoint instead of recommend. Well, what it was is we were looking, at that point, this board was looking to appoint somebody to that board. And that's what we were questioning, that this board didn't have the authority to appoint somebody to that. And then that's when the second phase of that, at 8:27, was actually a request to the school board to put somebody on that strategic planning. So I just think that I'd like to change the recommended to appoint, would be my suggestion to this committee.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Any other corrections? I'll accept a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll put a motion to accept them with Mr. O'Neill's corrections.
Corrections, as corrected. Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Is there any correspondence?
Correspondence folder will circulate around.
Are there any delegations or individuals? Seeing none. Do we have a administrative report?
So we had talked about a couple things coming up, and I think one of the questions that you may have been brought up is how much of the budget is relating to expense and how much of the budget is relating to salary and benefits. And in my haste to put them down, I didn't bring the documentation that I had, but the expenditure budget is approximately 19 million in change out of the $70 million budget. The rest represents salaries and benefits.
Okay.
So the balance of that represents what's left. Now, the expense portion of that, if you will, the non-salary, non-benefit portion, isn't completely discretionary to some extent. We do have expenses that are required to run our schools and that sort of thing. I think the question had come up, that you and I had discussed what that would look like, and I apologize for not having the exact number with me on that. But that's about the breakdown. So I don't know if you had any questions on that.
Well, I think the committee would like to see a more
Breakdown?
detailed breakdown of
Yep.
that.
Yep.
If you could have that for us for the next meeting.
Yeah, before we leave tonight, if you hang around for a few minutes. So.
All right, or tonight, that would be fine.
Perfect.
Any other administrative issues?
No, I don't think so.
Do any of the budget members have any reports? Yes,
Not a report, but maybe a request. And I know Eileen has been taking a lot of notes, so
I don't know that they're legible.
would it be, maybe, to see if the board wants it, we had each of the building principals kind of give us their top priority projects that they would like to see, just a quick summary. And so if we did it by building and that administrator, just so the board as a whole, if somebody couldn't make it, at least knows, you know, what each school's administrator wanted.
I think that's a good idea. Is there a way we can, by suggestions on
I
how
can
we?
try to do the best I can with the notes that I've assembled. I don't know how complete they're going to be, because they were really just like jotting down as I was going along a few thoughts, so.
I can work with Eileen,
Okay,
try and get it, and we'll give it to you,
okay.
and then you can pass it up to the group.
Is the committee okay with that?
It's just gonna be very simple. It's,
Well, it's a good supplement to what we'll be doing for the next 6 weeks.
yeah.
Any other budget committee members with reports or comments? Mr. Guide, you're up.
So Eileen, we did ask about putting you on for strategic planning. I got the sense that they'll let anybody in, I don't know. But it's funny, cause Jim is actually a, at-large member
Yes.
on that.
Oh, okay.
So, but they're more than welcome to have you. The meeting's on October 16th at 4 here.
So I had thought actually that when I'd asked about it, it didn't sound like that it had happened. I apologize, I didn't catch that it did. So I had just sort of sent a message to Dr. Wilson and
Yep.
said, you know, is it happening, is it open? And she said that I was welcome to observe.
Oh, yeah, yeah, so.
So, I mean, I don't wanna duplicate effort, but, you know, if you're
It's
already
fine.
on there, so I just think that we should be represented in some way, shape, or form.
Can we talk after the meeting?
Absolutely.
Other than that, the chair had put forth that they would like to represent a 3% cut in the budget. He took a consensus, not a vote or anything like that, through the room, just to see how the other board members were feeling about it. We didn't say where or anything like that, where it was gonna come from. The consensus was 5-4. Two members want to see what exactly that would represent before they made a decision on that, yes or no. But like I said, it was no vote, it was just, he was trying to get a feel for the room, so to speak.
This is where Mr. Dowd's report will come in, will be very critical, because it will come from, it would have to come, well, first off, we need a formal proposal, or formal request.
Right.
But once we got that, then we would have to work on, we'll give you an idea of, and that board member, an idea of what the impact would be on the discretionary expenses.
Okay.
So does the budget committee make that determination, or do you accept recommendations for areas,
No,
for programs?
we will do it, we just need input.
Oh, okay.
The governing body would give a
The governing
recommendation.
body is the prime directive.
Yep.
And so they were requesting 3%,
Not requesting, that's what they're,
that's their goal, in other
Right.
words. So, just from clarification purposes, maybe back to them or whatever, if we're talking about 19, that's basically expense that we can work with, are we talking about 3% on that, or 3% on the whole?
19 is fixed costs, correct?
70. The whole.
The whole, which means a larger percentage of what our responsibility, just so that we're all
Mhm.
eyes open on that.
Okay. I'm not sure what I want to do is, because Mrs. Sherman's been hanging around here for a while, what I'd like to do is go to new business directly and then do unfinished business after the presentation. Is that agreeable to the committee?
So maybe-
Okay, Mrs. Sherman, you're up.
Everybody? So I bring you greetings from the CIP committee. Just to give you a little bit of background, because I know you've got some new members here. The CIP committee was formed as a standing school board committee during the year 2015-16. They worked almost a year to get a process figured out and how we were gonna direct ourselves. The committee, we made a decision on the composition of the committee. It's very unique. It's the only standing school board committee that has 4 school board members, 1 from each community, 4 reps, 1 from each community, we call it community representation, 2 Timberlane Budget Committee members as part of the composition, and 3 what I'll call administration or SLT members as part of the composition. So it's a neat group of people. So the first CIP they put together was last year, or the one we're currently in, and what I'm assuming you have, because the chair asked to have everything come to you ahead of time, which we were, between Jeff and I. Jeff is the co-chair with me. We tried to provide you everything you could possibly want, so you should have quite a big, thick packet, I would guess. This is the book I carry from meeting to meeting, and I thank Julie and Dave and Jim Paul, who sat on the committee with us the last couple of years, trying to work through the number of requests. So you've gotten the requests for this current CIP that the school board accepted as a report at our last school board meeting, which I think was September 21st, if I've got the date right. They accepted what I call year 1, or the 18-19 forecast. They accepted the long-range forecast, which, of course, we haven't vetted all the years going all the way out yet. And what you should also have, I hope, is the executive summary report. You had a chance to look that over. And also what I call the Word document that just kind of tells you our process, I think, pretty clearly. We've made a lot of changes through this over the years to make sure that's pretty clear. So the school board, the CIP finished, the school board accepted the report, and here it is for you. I think there are 34 projects, I might have miscounted, that are in the 18-19 CIP. So I'm speaking only from the CIP committee's viewpoint, and that was we moved them all along to the school board, and we are moving them all along at this point. The CIP committee is moving them all along to you. So if I can answer questions, I will, and probably Jeff can answer some things. I am not an expert on roofs or many other things, actually, but I've learned a lot. It's kind of been fascinating. I have learned a lot about roofs, but I'm still not an expert on roofs. So you will, I hope, have department heads in and what I call the budget stakeholders here, who can give you way more information than I can. But this is the work we've done.
So if I-
Just for clarification, for the benefit of the new folks, the CIP, as I understand it, and you clarify this for me, is that the CIP committee does not recommend or not recommend a project. It's to either the school board or anyone else. All you do is make sure that it complies with certain criteria and properly scheduled so that all the costs don't hit 1 year hard.
Right, because that's what a CIP does. I know you all come from communities where you probably have CIPs in your community plans, where you're trying to forecast out, and so you're not getting those great big dips and spikes, one way or the other, in your tax situation. We're only 2 years in, we are still in our infant stage doing this. I gotta personally say that the 4 community members that we've had, from the 4 communities, John Sherman from Plastow, Cindy Bucco from Sandown, it was originally Kim Farrer from Danville, and now it's Sean O'Neill from Danville, and Jim Paul and Ellen Beckworth from Atkinson have been huge resources and huge support as we've looked just beyond our small window into the bigger community window. So they've been hugely helpful in us crafting this together, so I want to always publicly thank them, because they're volunteering their time to us.
So a couple quick notes, if I can add to that, Sue. So the CIP committee started a year ago over a year ago from the ground up, and going through that process, I think the process has been refined. And I think the process is better this year than it was last year. I think the process will be better next year than it is this year. The school board accepted the report, the 1-year report that you see, as well as the years 1 through 6 report that you see subsequent to that, really for the purpose of passing it along. There was some desire to vet, look at those requests more closely, and I think that's fair. I think that as we go through the budget process, as we hear from the department heads, from the building owners, from the budget owners, as to what the detail is from their request, and they'll all be here at some point during our season. It'll be good to, I think, to have discussion on all ends and gather feedback on that to the extent that, that things develop during that time. That said, what we have is essentially a list. It's put together by the CIP with an eye toward a couple factors. One of them is that, in the absence of a strategic plan, any work that is proposed would not interfere with perhaps where a strategic plan may take the district at a later point in terms of doing work or proposing work and then redoing it a couple of years later. If that were the case, I think there's been a great deal of deference put forward to that. During our process this year, we focused a lot more and had our budget owners and requesters articulate the need from a student impact standpoint as well. And I think that's been a healthy exercise. Where the budget committee hasn't necessarily, they've accepted that this is the report. They'll have further comments on it, I'm sure, and we'll go back and forth, I'm sure, to the extent that they may pick certain items up as a warrant. I think it's important to view this list, as a common list that all the boards are sharing, that the CIP has put forward, so that we're all talking in the common language of one articulated sheet. That the CIP committee came together and through their evaluation process ended up articulating out into the 1-year list you see in front of you. So at least we can all be comparing apples to apples to apples during this process, and I think that in itself has a lot of merit. If there are requests here that the school board may be against, the budget committee may be against, but guess what? We're all in the same document. So let's take it, with that being the spirit. I think we'll do well to be able to have the same list amongst all our groups. So I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that too.
No, I thought that it went much smoother this year. And the threshold we use is $10,000. Anything above $10,000 we wanted into this plan. So that's why you're seeing that as there are things that cost less than $10,000 that I'm sure that people have in their budgets, but won't be here on this list anyway.
So there were a lot of items on the list, and certainly we could go through and articulate some of the points. I think the budget owners, the building owners, the requesters themselves are the ones to be in the best position to support some of these requests. Some requests can be supported at a building level. Some requests can be supported from a facility standpoint. For example, a roof, which is in need of repair. Facilities can speak to end of life on that very, very well. Sue did prepare an executive summary which hits a couple points on each of the items that are included in the CIP. And if you see on the years 1 through 6 list, you'll see a watermark years 2 through 6 not vetted. The requests have been looked at, but you know, I think it's really important with a very active strategic planning committee in effect. Really, I think that this committee would be remiss to be looking with any significant commitment beyond, beyond what's in our view. And what's in our view right now really is year one, which is the budget year 18-19. So with respect to the year one requests, Sue or I could speak to, you know, any of the requests that are on the list to the extent that there is knowledge. You'll see at the bottom of the list and that year one that we have some revenue offsets for certain of the projects, one of them being, well, both for playground equipment, one being for Danville, one being for Atkinson. Building tours, tonight we talked a little bit about PTA contributions to that effort. We made a decision, however you want to characterize it, to once again avoid confusion and address the expenses proposed in the CIP on a gross budgeting perspective. So that means that something might be on here for 12, for example, the Atkinson playground equipment, but with the offset of revenue, the net impact is 7. So the way that I budget that is I budget the 12,000 in the budget, and I budget 5,000 as an offset in revenue. So the tax impact is 7 net, but we've got to look at it one way or the other just for simplicity and clarity. Do we look at it that it's a net 7, or do we look at it that it's a gross 12 with an offset of 5? We're looking at it that it's a gross 12 with an offset of 5. So as long as we're on the same page.
Gross accounting.
Sorry?
I said I would prefer gross accounting.
Yeah, and as long as we're on the same page, I think it makes it a lot easier, and we can actually look at the requests and not have to fiddle around with what the.
With a lot of these items, you know, the litmus test is $10,000, is that I know that at least I would like to see is that, you know, like, for example, we have the $300,000 in here for the fiber optic. We should be able to have quotes. I mean, I understand when you're putting this together, as we're putting there, we're pulling out a number.
Yep.
That number needs to get refined, because now we're starting to actually put
Exactly.
financial commitments that's gonna put
Exactly.
various towns into play here, because that, even if it's 300,000 that we put in there, and the project comes in at 200,000, we're raising another $100,000 of tax revenue.
Yeah.
That will be given back to them in a subsequent year if everything flows the way it normally should flow back in a surplus. But it's still, you have to raise and appropriate that money, and so that with a lot of these items, I would like to see, at least from my viewpoint, you know, bona fide quotes that we're having in here, installation and stuff like that. But the numbers that we have in here are great placeholders.
Yep.
To give a ballpark, but then when we're coming in here for the budget, it's like what we're moving forward with.
And that's why I called them a planning number, Mr. O'Neill, it's not a budget number, it's a planning number that, in fact, this business technology director, is 1 year into us and has, really.
I just
really
wanted to make
worked
sure
hard,
that the
so,
planning number didn't become the budget number,
Yeah,
just
No.
and
automatically.
it could.
It could,
It could.
I would agree, but
I would
it,
hope it's less, but
it
of
would,
course we would.
it should be vetted before it becomes the budget number.
And it's interesting, because you hit on the one project that, yeah, okay, we can, you know, roughly, you know, come pretty close on a vehicle, or come pretty close on construction, even way out. But that was one item that I did not even request we get anything firm when we began the process in March. Because where we are to the evaluation process that we're going through right now for technology and those sorts of things, that's where the value is. And I think on that project in particular, 300,000 was put out there. That's a number from some time ago. But
Yeah.
here are the other things that I'm asking
It is.
for that I expect will be presented as part of that. You know, what are we looking at for costs? What are we looking at for viability? And what are we looking at for cost savings? Because the 300,000 is not just, you know, running fiber everywhere. It would involve perhaps subsequently removing some items from the CIP for hardware and things like that. That would be part of that package. So you're absolutely right, and I think that you're going to see a lot more of those estimates, particularly on that one. That's a tough technology thing to go too far out on. It seems to be changing, but we're about as far as we can go in that process, and we're looking at, or our technology director is looking at what that actual cost is going to be. He is going to be presenting in the near future. I do not know that we'll have a final number for that. It will be before the end of the budget process, both in terms of what that dollar value is going to be, what the impact on future items on the CIP is going to be, and approximately what that's going to do to our current expense structure, and from a hardware perspective and that sort of thing. So, but that's actually the perfect one to talk about, because that's exactly what that is. It's one of those things you really have to go up as close as you can.
He's
get.
2 years into the project, this is the second year he's been analyzing what we really need for this whole year that he's been here. But I hope you'll listen carefully to what he has to say.
Yeah, but it's not, definitely not, I don't think the number's gonna be 300, and whatever that is, it's gonna be an awful lot close to what the actual costs are going to be, with a reflection as to what may be coming out of the CIP in subsequent years if we do the work now.
So I have a question for Sean. So I thought your point was great, to get some confirmation with real estimates. My question is, do you think we should see the estimates, or just somebody saw the estimates and they put the real number down there? So we know 300s. I'm just from our
I've been
board.
and I'm just speaking for me personally,
Yeah.
is I'm a proponent of data. I love data, you know, we're just talked about it earlier, and it was a great suggestion that you brought up with Eileen turning around and taking her notes and using them as a supplement. I mean, it's not gonna hurt us to have that data in front of us, so we can turn around and break it down. And we can even ask them questions that might have not even been raised at a school board meeting, which then Dan can then bring that back to, and say, hey, this came up at the budget committee meeting? Let's talk about this, because it could have some other effect.
The nice thing is that you've had people on the CIP committee that are sitting here with you now, and that's huge. There's 4 of you here, actually. So that's huge that you've got that much more
So
input.
if I just stay on this topic, I think it's a great idea. And I'm just looking at all these items, so if we were to go through and reviewing the budget, the potential contracts. So if I pick on, anything on here, again, we only have so many meetings, where are we gonna fit the time in? So I'm not saying don't do it, I like the idea, I'm just saying,
Well, I'll add this, though, like, if you look at one of the last requests out there, it's for playground equipment, I believe, we don't have an exact number on these things until we actually go to do the work, but there's there's actually a quote in there for what some of this stuff would look like and where the estimate comes
They
from.
had one in there for Atkinson and Sandown as well.
Yeah.
Yes, they
Right.
both have one.
And then
They
if
have
you,
a quote.
if you go a few pages further up, there are some requests for the science labs, and there are some quotes in there for, based on what we've done in the classes that we've already attended to. So, for review purposes, it's nice to have in there, and on some of these, they'll be tightened up as we get closer to that deadline, and it may be something that never comes up at the meeting.
so how do we identify a number on here to know if it's just a straw number for the time being, or it's a number that has been vetted by a contract?
As we get closer to the actual budget owners presenting, I'll be going through and discussing with them that if they have a closer number, now's the time to get the closest number on that.
So everything in here is an estimate?
No, not necessarily. No, I mean, it's all an estimate, but it's all an estimate based typically on something. Sometimes we can say, hey, this is what the quote was for what it is that we're looking for, plus or minus some factor of time. Because even now, getting an estimate on some things, we're gonna have a factor of time. Is the price gonna go up between now and then? Oh, use a number and make it work.
I can't see it being an estimate on everything, because I mean, look at the sound system for the boardroom. It's $17,571. That's not an estimate.
Right,
That's an exact quote.
right.
Well, and it's attached.
No, and I know that.
Yeah.
But that's
So-
what I was meaning, that not all of them are estimates.
Yeah.
There are exact quotes on here.
Yeah.
Any questions on anything specific in there, or any?
I did have one question. There were 2 items listed as, for the middle school furniture, and they both have the same request ID, so I didn't know if they were 2 separate $15,000 requests,
Where are you?
or if it's
Front page at the bottom.
FAC-005, replacing the furniture
So you came in so early.
that it was
Nope.
fixed later.
Middle school, see?
It's been,
Those two
it was a,
05.
back to
Okay.
back.
No, it's 005, this one, this one.
it's a misprint, I believe. I thought we fixed that
I
one.
was gonna say, I don't feel like I had that on mine,
Yeah.
the other one I had.
What's the other one? You have 005.
One is,
005,
one's gonna,
listed twice.
Oh,
it's-
yeah, no,
because it's the same request in our numbering system.
Okay.
One year it's gonna be to do the one at the middle school, and the next year it's the same piece of equipment at Pollard School.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So that is a little misleading, that should be, so I thought we had fixed that one. Oops.
Oh, I see, it says
So we
MSPS, it
need to
should just say.
subtract 15.
109,
I
Okay.
think subtract 15,000, but
Okay,
1905, and that's at 18.
thanks for picking that up. I thought I'd fixed it.
No, I think in the final published version,
I got an early version, I think.
Oh, you got an early bird version.
Yeah, I was there on Friday.
I think I looked at that and I said that came up, and I also wanted to add in the revenue offset. So if everyone has the revenue offset, your total number for year one should be 1890. Keen eye, though.
Yeah, in this report, it's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are those floor burnishers they
Yep,
use.
yep, yep.
I call them Zambonis, but
I do too.
those have gotten a lot of use.
Any other questions for Mr. Chairman?
Well, I hope this is helpful as you go through your deliberations. I don't envy you.
Well, thank,
And I hope it's helpful for the school board as well, because I hope they're gonna discuss these projects as well and realize that there's some thought and vetting and process going on here.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and as you saw tonight out at Sandown Central, you know, I think we have a sign on that plan. And-
Yes,
and-
Down
it
at
is,
the
yeah.
bottom.
Yeah, and the board's looking for some, I think they're looking to evaluate their options. So where there were a number of requests that came in for Sandown Central, for example, but there again, it's deference to what the school board will be doing in the future with that property. And so as not to be redundant, we looked at kitchens, we looked at a bunch of things that may need to be done. Really, it's the sign, and if anything happens, that quite frankly can always be moved. So look at this list in the spirit of that, and, hey, we talked about this, why isn't it on the list? There might be a reason why.
yes,
Speaking of things that aren't on the list, do we want to just let Sue know there was a theme with the elementary schools and the safety area having fire alarms and some of the other equipment out in those secure spaces? Or is that not a CIP? You're going to take care of that internally?
Yeah, I think that'll be taken care of internally.
Okay.
A safety committee.
Safety committee, yeah,
You want that?
You know what I'm saying, Dan?
yeah.
You've got people who are, let's say, bad people in a locked area, they can't get any further, but you have a fire alarm, all the kids come out
Yeah, so
up
that would
towards
be,
it.
that would be safety.
Okay.
Are you on that, Jeff?
I am, and
So-
we've had the discussion, and we're looking to budget that as part of the operating, a certain aspect.
I just
of
want to make
it.
sure that it's
Covered.
somewhere.
It's being
Yeah,
looked at,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's just one thing in the buildings, it's very easy to demonstrate, 'cause it's right when you walk in, so.
Yeah.
See the cardboard over the little exchange window.
any other,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
yes, sir.
So, this is a living document,
A living fluid document.
right?
Fluid.
So the committee will meet continuously, or are they gonna pick up about a year from now?
Oh,
and
no,
then-
no, not a year from now. We'll pick up, I believe we've set our next meeting date for March 21st, but don't quote me, but
Right.
March,
After the vote.
after our, right, to begin again, see where we're at, what happened, and then start to lay out where
See
we're
what happened, meaning
going.
what passed, what
What
didn't.
passed, what
Right.
didn't pass.
Got it.
What what
Completed.
project didn't make it.
Mhm.
You know,
Sure,
I'm well aware, we all know that, not everything's gonna make it, that's okay, but at least you got something to start with as a document here. Like Jeff says, all in the same one document.
One page,
Yeah.
all on the same page.
So that's our plan right now. The first year, we met almost 1 year all the way around the calendar. I made them meet every other week until we could get this document done. It was a lot of work. And now it seemed much easier this year, Mike. It really did. So March 21st, I think, is the date.
It's very compelling for administration to make sure the requests come in timely and well supported if it means fewer meetings, so. I won't say who drove that process, but.
And I was my bulldog self.
Yeah, so, we did get an earlier start, this year, I think the request did come in a much more orderly
Yeah, it
manner.
did.
And by the way, we did try the same meeting last year, right? But if you recall, everything was delayed because of snow. The vote, half the towns voted, some
yeah.
didn't, so then we had to wait.
That's right, that was nice.
So we tried to have one to wrap it up last year, and we said, well, we can't even get close to the date, so.
What a fun year.
so,
So,
one more, is this being shared with the town governments. So for instance, the towns can say, oh, look, the school district would like to spend this much money over the next 6 years, so they can at least get a sense of what the impact to their towns might be.
Well, we have community members on the committee. At least 3 of them are selectmen, so.
I think at least for me again personally, I would, unless it's been vetted. I mean, there's a lot of things down there that we got pushed on out. We were really focusing, from my limited exposure to the CIP committee, it was things that got pushed on out. And so we moved stuff on out there. I mean, there's stuff in here that I think that I know that I would have a concern about. We're talking about elevators over at Pollard for $750,000, those kind of things. And you can see if you start bringing those numbers back and using them in the tax calculations, you're gonna get scared very quickly.
Well, I would hope that each of the community members say, hey, look, they actually made a plan.
No, I would agree with that. That's good. You gotta have a plan
So
first.
there.
There's a plan and there's a process. I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done here, and just like huge kudos to yourself, the entire team.
Thank you.
Really, it's, yeah, it's great work.
Is the document available to the public?
Yeah,
That
I can-
it's-
I can see
It's
if it's posted,
online,
yeah.
so, I mean, it's not like we can't, they can see it.
Yeah, I just think the big thing with the years 2 and beyond, you know, in the absence of direction from the board on some of these bigger projects, in the absence of direction from a strategic planning committee, you know, they're out there. They could be out there. There've been concerns have been identified, but really without that direction, I think CIP has given significant deference. Quite frankly, I've never seen, I mean, why have years 2 through 6? You know, really, but things are just placeholders. They're out there. They've been identified as potential issues, but it'll have a lot more.
More will get added, some will get removed.
They'll have a lot more credibility though with a definitive direction, whichever way that goes. So I think we'll definitely look forward to that. I've been looking forward to that for a while, to try and move on and address some of the issues with some direction. So, and that's it. And one of those, by the way, was the detention pond out back. We talked to the school board. Had spent quite a bit of time talking about the water needs on campus. Really, nothing is on here because there hasn't really been a decision as to what the scope of that project's going to be. So that's just an example of you know, you could put a maximum amount on there, but it didn't even make it on because they really haven't indicated what that's going to be. So.
Okay.
Good.
Any other questions or concerns? Thank you very much,
You're
Mr.
welcome,
Chairman.
Dave.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you,
So
Sue.
it was better the second
Yeah.
time.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Dowd, if you would give us a review of the prior year's expenses?
So this isn't
Expenditures?
the cleanest version that I have out there, but just in terms of getting an idea as to where our actuals were, that we budgeted. I have a better report, a couple better reports to run, you know, comparing year over year, and that sort of thing. So this isn't the neatest or tidiest report, but really this is being produced for the purpose of taking a very high level view. If it offers any direction, you'll see the general GL budget there in the first column, under the Timberland expenditures report, range date and year to date, which are the same, budget balance, and then the final budget balance. Should there have been any encumbrances that were open, they may have carried forward to that extent. So really, this is by function and by object, so we'll call it a function object report. You should have with you the account number format as well as the breakdown of that. And typically, we're talking in the worlds of function or object or function and object for a lot of the reporting that we tend to look at. It's a handy breakdown. The account number format that you have is the basis that the state of New Hampshire uses for its reporting cycle, and so we in turn have the same type of reporting cycle. So in terms of where some of the variances are, happy to discuss or research or see what I can do to provide some clarity on any of the areas of question that you may have on some of those issues in particular. And I think if we look at getting into the getting into the last and second to last page, you'll see some of our transportation, on the second to last page, some of our transportation expenses and various budget on those items. Some of our security expenses, and then if you go on to the last page, you'd see our site improvements at the top, as well as our building improvement categories under the 4,600 account. So we may still have some changes coming from the auditors. So these really aren't numbers that are real good to stick with on a permanent basis. You'll see below, it's just in the format of this report, we have from the 5110 accounts all the way down to the bottom of the fund transfer accounts. Principal on debt and the interest on the debt, pretty self-explanatory, but the food service fund and the federal projects fund, you'll see that there are some expenses there, but as a general proposition, that is where we place those in our general fund to account for the expenditures. We have separate funds for those which are typically offset by, to some extent by revenue, but we have to account for them somewhere on our 100 level report, and that's where that ends up. So really those expenses come out in, and if you've looked at our audited financials, you'll see that we have some consolidation that occurred. We have consolidation of our funds, government-wide financial consolidation. We don't have those audited financials; those won't be up for a while. So when those come out, the numbers tend to make a lot more sense on a consolidated basis. For our purposes, the Fund 100 is where we handle all the budgeting, so it's in one place.
Question for you.
Yes.
So when you hand, this is at least for me, when you hand me this stuff, so since I don't read these every day, I'm not even picking on any numbers. Can you just go across the columns, start with the first page?
Sure.
Just give me just a general identifier. What is your GL budget?
General ledger budget, that's the budget figure that was set by the voters in
General ledger.
the previous month,
Okay.
yep, in the previous year, sorry.
Yep. And then range to date?
So in this case, range to date and year to date are going to be the same because this is a year, a report for the year, right?
If you got this halfway through the year,
Got it. That would be your
these
range.
numbers would be very different.
Okay.
And then the balance would be the budget balance that would be left from a strictly cash perspective. The encumbrance are commitments that have been made or amounts that have been we're obligated to, but that have not been paid yet. And so then the final budget balance category reflects what that true amount is.
The encumbrances, if it, like, the school board said we were gonna buy this, and we hadn't bought it yet, you would encumber it, so it would be on this year's budget and not the next year's
It's a
budget.
signed purchase order most of the
Right,
time.
yes, exactly,
So you may have actually bought it and just not paid for it.
right.
So then all these encumbrances then would have school board approval, is
Yes.
that correct?
Somebody
That is
has to
correct
sign
then, right?
Yeah, well, they have approval on, someone, typically it's from my office, if the budget's there to make the purchase, it's made. And these make a lot more sense, I think, in the context of actually seeing the financial statements,
Well,
seeing.
there's two different things. I mean, you can have the approval process to purchase something, but to encumber something is you're taking the financial obligation and pushing it out to the subsequent fiscal year, but you want it to accounting purposes, you want to charge it back to the previous year. So that's a specific process that needs to be noted, and it has to be done by in this case, it would be the school board that would turn around and say, yes, this project we know is going to be signed, we're done. We're gonna pay for it in this year's budget, but it will actually, the goods will be delivered, where the services will be done in
In next year's
the
budget.
next year sometime.
Yep, so these are more along, these are obligations that we've made, right, but they simply haven't been paid for. We typically don't encumber funds for something like that, like, oh, we'd like to take it out of this year's budget, we need a hard obligation, meaning that it's out there and that it's not something that we want to spend out of this year's money next year. It's something that we've obligated, as Jim said, typically you're gonna see a purchase order out for that. And that's a standard that I use when looking at, looking at the encumbrances at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Sometimes
going back to, like, when you're talking about the technology, $300,000, let's say that Ken does the PO, hands it to Jeff, and he sees 240,000. well, that's what the PO is being drawn out for. He signs off, it goes to the superintendent to the school board, and then they have a folder of them that goes around the table. They all have to peruse it, and then they sign off, and the money can be spent, but he can't spend the money until it's signed off.
That's correct.
Don't know if that's true.
That's for a warrant, but now,
No, that's for, I'm talking about, earlier you asked about the process of that 300 grand. Was it a quote, or was it a guess? If it was, they didn't have a quote in the materials from CIP, and he put down 300,000, because that's what the vendor said it was going to be, and then it comes back after the final quote.
Correct.
At 240, we're only paying the 240.
No, I agree, but that will reflect then in a balance of $60,000 down there. That's different than the encumbrance line. The encumbrance line is, since this is a year-end report,
Right.
is that's why I believe he's capturing the encumbrances, is this is saying is that this is how much money is going to be added to this particular budget, I mean, for this particular report, but we're gonna be paying for it, I mean, we're paying for it like now, which is where we're right now. This fiscal year is closed, it's in our packet right here. But we're gonna pay for that right, in this year's budget. But when the auditors come in here and adjust all these books, they're gonna turn around and they're gonna push this check that he might have cut last week
Right.
through the authorization of the school board. We'll go back to this, the auditors will adjust it, and it will be actually hit this budget. So these numbers will be adjusted. And if Jeff is spot on, the amount that was expended year-to-date, plus the encumbrances, is what will be the final audited version.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yeah, it's fair to say, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Fair to say.
Jeff, did you have our exact surplus number yet?
I do not have that I'd be willing to share. I have a feeling there's gonna be a change or two coming, in the pipeline
Okay.
as well, from the auditors. And I'll tie up with them, we'll have that number for our next meeting, and I think maybe even before that, I think you guys are calling for it, yeah,
Will we have it next week?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a question, Jeff, in regards to looking at the grand totals in here, it's saying that the balance is 6.23 million.
Right, and that doesn't look at, that's not a consolidated view, that's only that's really only out of our 100 fund. So we have our other funds as well, that when they get consolidated in, you'll see the expense from them roll up. We budget them here on that gross budgeting theory, but they aren't consolidated in this regard. Our audited financial statements show those consolidations.
Because this, I don't know, I'm seeing you're capturing the whole budget of the $70 million. And that's,
I am capturing the whole budget in the 100 fund here. The expense gets picked up on, on the 220 fund, 210 fund, and those expenses get consolidated in. So I'm capturing the whole budget. I've got the 100 fund expenses here. The 210, 220 fund expenditures are captured as part of those consolidated financial statements. This isn't the let's just say the prettiest report to put out. I much prefer to have the final consolidated numbers to get a true picture as to what that actual number, what that actual number looks like. To have all of our expenses pushed together. And as of right now, for analysis purposes, where are we on regular ed? Where are we on our broad functions, special ed, vocational ed? How do we come in on transportation? Those numbers are in here, and that's where there's some value in these reports.
so is it fair to say that this report is a subset of the consolidation plan would be up here, and this one that we have in front of us is down below here?
Correct, or, either way. Either this is down here and that's up there, but there are other funds to report and consolidate in to get our true picture.
So would those other funds make up that 6 million?
Yes, largely.
Not all.
The expense.
Not all of it.
Not all of it. Yeah, not all of it. But the expenses would make up the difference. So, and our auditors have a way of looking at consolidations. They consolidate in a couple different ways. If you've taken a look at our financial statements, you'll see how they bring them all together, and they have a couple different approaches on consolidation. From a governmental-wide standpoint, bring all of the funds together. They do look at it a couple different ways, but essentially what they're doing is they're bringing everything, all those numbers together.
Any other questions? On expenditure report? Okay. Let's go back then to unfinished business. Is there anything in the parking lot that we should be talking about tonight?
I don't think so. I don't recall there being anything from the last meeting. I did make a change to the agenda to move unfinished business, move parking lot to unfinished business, so we can discuss that. And even if there's nothing there, I'll still reflect it, so as a placeholder in case anything comes up. I don't know if anyone had anything else that was or should have been on the parking lot.
Okay. Any other business? What I'd like to mention is that the next meeting is October 12th at 7. And this will be the first meeting where we will be getting presentations from principals and administrators. And before then, you should receive copies of their written copies of their report, their presentations for you to review and preview before they do their presentation. So you have a chance to look at what they're asking, what they're going to present, and explain and justify. And more specifically, there's specific items that might be in their CIP. So we'll have an opportunity with the data, with the material we've received in their requisitions to the CIP committee and their presentations, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about their, to justify their
Requests.
requests, have more detail.
Actually, on one of them, I will say, perfect example, by the way, Atkinson, there were 2 requests for Atkinson. At least 2, but the 2 that I'll give as an example, one's for playground equipment, the other's for replacement of a roof on a cycle.
Yeah.
Kathy will be able to help us with the playground equipment. She
Yeah.
probably won't be able to help us so much from a technical perspective with the roof.
Yeah.
But that's just an example of that's going on at her building, but we're gonna get 2 different perspectives on it. And that'll be facilities and maintenance when they present on some of these issues.
So that's sort of the objective for the next meeting is that, yes,
So will all of this be up on the SharePoint?
Yes, it's on the, did you go to the meeting?
Okay.
Click on the meeting and you should see it there. The agendas are under the agenda.
Once you log in
Yes, yeah.
and you click on the agenda, all this stuff's on the agenda.
Well, this stuff, I post the agendas with the agenda and then these under the actual meeting.
Okay, so you do different
Like
than what
workspace.
Kathy does for the board.
Yeah, I don't know what, I think she has an agenda and then she has like an agenda packet.
That's what I'm saying. So we have a packet, we click on it, it's got everything that we get at
Yeah.
the board meeting, so
Yeah, it's a little,
however you do it is fine.
yeah, it's a little different. Maybe I don't,
Because I only click it once and it gives me everything versus seeing everything separate. I mean, sometimes it takes a little while to load.
maybe I'll, it would make sense. I think we're doing it a little differently this year. It would probably make sense. So it's having that debate, where does it go?
Yeah,
It's not really an agenda, it's not a general item, right?
right.
So I'm gonna look into that and see, because it would make sense to me to have the agenda under agenda,
Yeah.
right? And then have the agenda packet with the agenda, like this whole thing,
Right.
just out there.
Right.
So let me see what I can do. One of the problems that we ran into with this past meeting was just the sheer file size.
I was gonna say it's huge compared to what you were trying to.
Yeah, and I don't mean from a physical paper perspective or size perspective. It's just a difficult file to get in.
Images.
A lot of images. It's
Right.
not an easy thing to put in. It's not on email, so as a general proposition, you should probably be able to get it. But when the packet's already here, come on down and get them. I don't want to run anyone's printer out of.
Yeah, so
yes.
So what's the agenda on the 12th? Can you tell us who's going to be presenting on those? Does it say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says on this one, do you remember this one from last week?
Okay.
We had Sandown North, Pollard Elementary, Sandown Central, Atkinson Academy, and the tech/business operations. So pretty much all the elementary schools and then the tech director and over the top here.
That's good, because particularly the tech director, that's a huge block on the CIP.
Yeah.
So it'll be very important to,
It will be, and I think as we discussed timing on some exact quotes for, as close as we can get quotes for the budget. And I think that he'll be able to shed a lot of insight on what the process is, what he's looking at. We may not have final numbers on the project until later in October. It's gonna be before the end of the time that we close out our budget cycle. But I think he's gonna be able to tell you a lot about, from a technical perspective, what it is that he's looking to do and what it is that he thinks the impact will be on the district. In terms of hardware, consolidation of systems if it's possible, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So just as a heads up, I think that the final numbers will be coming after the meeting, but I think the questions can be addressed and the points can be addressed at the meeting. So when those final numbers are shared, we'll be able to have some perspective on them.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions on the plan for the next meeting? All right, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So made.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. The meeting, I'm closing the meeting at 9:37.